Now, we're going to talk about identifying your skills. So the first thing to know about identifying your skills is, oh, too far. Scroll, excuse me about that. Ah, so one of the things we're going to be talking about is transferable skills, hard skills, soft skills, those types of things. A lot of times we take for granted the skills that we bring to bear. We think we've only done these types of things or we only have this kind of thing from our educational attainment, but I'm here to tell you nothing could be further from the truth. I'm going to show you an exercise about the raw number of skills that you have, and I'm willing to bet that you didn't even realize you had that many. Okay, so we're going to take a little quiz. Now, don't worry, it's not graded. You don't even need to have a pencil and paper. If you have one, great, but if you don't worry about it. But we are going to do a little bit of a quiz here. So just so you know, here goes. What is a skill? And you can put your answer in the chat box for us, but give us an example. How would you define a skill? I'm seeing a lot of great answers in the chat. Well, some of you just nailed it right off the bat. So what is a skill? Anything you can do. That can be anything from mundane making spaghetti and meatballs all the way to doing, stick welding or TIG welding or any of those types of things, and everything in between. Reading blueprints, being a dental hygienist, everything in the middle that you can do. So that is what is a skill. Now, the next question. How many skills does the average person have? Think to yourself, how many skills does the average garden variety Minnesotan have? And before you say many or a lot, put a number down. Yep, some of you are close, some of you are underestimating it. That's very normal. I'll tell you what, the average person has between 500 and 800 different skills they can bring to bear. Not all of them are ones that you're going to use on a day-to-day basis, but you have a lot of skills under your belt, a lot of ones that you're not necessarily even realizing that you have that you can bring to bear on your job search. So just again, think broadly about skills. Average person can identify about 10 skills. That's what I just saw in the chat. I saw some of you saying 40, 50, hundreds, numerous, but on average, when we talk about that, the average person can identify 10 skills. That's about what comes to mind. Surprisingly enough, 80% of people can't identify or sell those skills in an interview or bring those to bear when talked about it in an interview setting. That's a lot. And the reason why they can't, for a lot of reasons, but a lot of times it's not even recognizing that you have the skills to begin with and how to demonstrate them or how to showcase them properly. So that's something just to be aware of, is that we often gloss over the skills that we have because we're not necessarily giving ourselves enough credit for them, or we think that they're just average skills that everybody has. Let me just tell you, as somebody who works with people one-on-one and in group settings to identify skills, almost every single one of you in here today is probably underestimating your capabilities and what you have to showcase to prospective employers. And you probably are underestimating how capable you are. I promise you that's probably happening. The skills that you have are not just developed because of what you've written on your resume in terms of your work history. I want to really emphasize that, okay? Your skills are, yes, your work experience, but it's also your educational attainment, volunteer work for causes that you care about, interacting and socializing and developing soft skills, hobbies that you may have, whether it's collecting or whether it's any type of industry hobby that you're looking at, playing any kind of sport, all of the above. Guess what? All of the above is everyone you're dealing with here. So be aware of that. Every single one helps you develop that. Now, when we talk about what employers are looking for, a lot of times they are looking not just at those kinds of like, okay, they know how to read a blueprint. We need somebody who needs to know how to read a blueprint. They know how to do stick and TIG welding. They can do those. There's a lot of other things they're asking for. One of them is soft skills or people skills. And those are those interactive skills that we use every day, whether you're working with customers or clients, colleagues and coworkers, the ability to resolve questions and concerns that come up. One of the biggest ones that you can think of is conflict resolution, those types of skills, because conflict is inherent in a lot of what we do with people. So it's those people skills and being able to work with people. Second, will you fit in? Good question. It's not just about who you are and your capabilities, but will you be a good fit with the team that already exists and the personalities in the mix? Will you work well with the customers and clientele we serve? Those types of questions are a big fit. And can you adapt and learn? No matter what job you have, even if you are exactly out of central casting and you're exactly the kind of person they want, there's always adaptation and learning that has to happen on the job, no matter how well seasoned you are as a worker. Those are always big questions. So as you think about this, let me challenge you to think of some soft skills or some people skills that you've had to bring to bear. You can put them in the chat if you'd like and share them. I would love to see that. But think of those things that you have that you know that people look for when they're trying to make new hires. Those are really important. Okay, so let's talk about your skills knowledge. Knowing your skills is absolutely critical for a lot of different things. Um, Writing an effective resume is by far absolutely the most important way of doing skills knowledge. So if you know your skills, you're better prepared for your interview, bar none. You can prove your capability to potential employers. All right. So and there is a separate workshop for creative job search on resume writing, and I want to kind of go into that in more detail later. But identifying your skills helps you know what you can bring to those employers. Um, on occasion, companies will hire somebody who has really strong, hard, transferable, industry specific skills. But if they don't necessarily have soft skills that work, a lot of times that fit doesn't work out. And that is something that then they adapt to and focus on the next round of hiring. That can happen. So be aware of that. Beyond that, it helps you complete applications. You've probably seen these in applications, especially online applications, where it asks you questions not just related to your job history and work history and educational attainment, but also what makes you a good fit for this role, or why do you think you would be a good fit for that role? And those knowing your skills and what you can bring to bear helps you complete those applications in a more effective and compelling way for the reader. And then, most importantly, selling those qualifications in an interview. I want to really kind of drill it down on that. On times when I've been on the other side of the table in search committees, interviewing people for prospective roles, I'll tell you that one of the most compelling parts of an interview was when somebody knew their skill sets, their values that those skills brought to us, and could talk about them in depth and in detail, because it allowed us to ask follow-up questions about those skills that permitted us to really get to know the candidate. The longer I was talking to the candidate and getting to know them, I'll tell you, the more likely it is I thought that might be a top candidate. That might be the one. That might be the person that we need. And so being able to describe your skill sets, what you can bring to that company or that prospective employer, is a huge boon to you when you know what you've got under your belt. So, Heather, we're about a quarter through this. I just want to pause. Are there any questions right now that are in our chat? Anyone, any burning questions for us right now?
No burning questions, but I do have a comment that I thought it would be good
Sure.
to maybe have you touch on. It
Okay.
says, where I struggle is communicating my skills from a long career where many of them would be relevant to the position I feel. Like when you talk about a broad background, it comes off as being like cocky. How does you have
Right,
any advice on
right.
that?
So what I usually say is remember that the questions you're going to see in an interview are going to be tailored to the core competencies that are going to be there. So whenever you are being interviewed, think of what the core competencies of that job are and how your skills match to those core competencies with as many specific, concise examples as you can bring, because those examples are going to help you answer the questions that you're going to get. Realistically, you're not going to get questions in professional settings about, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? You're not going to get that. You're going to get questions about, tell me about a time when you had to rectify a mistake, or tell me a time when you had to resolve an issue between coworkers or something like that. Or tell me a time when you had to uh, rectify an invoice or something. These are all hypotheticals, but these are the types of questions you're going to get. So when you have a long history or broad background in one particular professional field, think of very specific instances of your skills that link up to the core competencies of those jobs, because I promise you, those are going to be where you're going to see the questions arise. So you don't need to sort of talk about, I'm this unbelievably qualified. Why? Of course you should, because that will come off a little bit braggadocious. You don't want to do that. But you absolutely do want to have really memorable examples of your capabilities and your skill sets for the core competencies of the job that you're interviewing for. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. All
And if
right.
anybody else has questions, please enter them in the chat.
Yep. So, all right. So we're gonna keep going here, and so I want to talk a little bit of detail about three kinds of skills. Okay, these are all skills that we all have, and they're skills that we all need to be able to articulate when we are either filling out an application and or in a job interview setting. So the first one is job skills. Now, job skills are kind of very specific. So, like, I'll use the example of a welder who can understand and read blueprint, who can interpret weld symbols, who knows how to do stick welding versus TIG welding versus MIG welding. If you're a welder, you know what I mean. If you're not, don't worry about it. But who has the ability to do all of those skills. Those are very specific to the job. That's what makes you qualified to do the work day in and day out, right? Those are those core competencies that you just need to have. Those are ones that you really can't substitute, but they don't always come from employment. They can come from educational attainment. They can come from things that you've done on a volunteer basis, depending on what kind of volunteer that looks like, those types of things. That's very specific job skills. Those are the core competencies of a job, especially when you see a job posting. Those are what are going to be there. I'm sure you've seen them already, but that's what job skills are. Soft skills, we sometimes call that self-management skills. That's how you get along with others. That's how you make yourself unique. So when I talk about soft skills, I don't just mean being able to defuse an argument or make a customer who's unhappy happy or something like that. Sometimes they can be things like dependability, reliability, trustworthiness, a commitment to honesty or a commitment to integrity. Those are kind of soft skills that are things you bring to bear as you do those job specific skills. So a good example would be if you're a welder and you see that a kind of weld is potentially hazardous, then you step back, you bring a colleague into it to look at it. You don't proceed because you may have a fire start, or it might ruin the metal. Those types of things can come along with that. So those are those soft skills, those self-management skills that you employ day in and day out, but you probably don't think about because you just kind of think about it as inherent to how you navigate the world. But you still want to talk about that, because let me tell you, you think everyone has soft skills, but I'll tell you what, a lot of people have them in different ways. And for the kind of job you're going for, the soft skills that you have may be more manageable or more important. Now, transferable skills are a little different. These are things that um, they're hard to teach. They're hard to instill through educational attainment, and that has to do with how you're going to fit into the company. So the transferable skills are the things that you do kind of all the time. So instead of like trustworthiness, transferable skills are the kind of things like attention to detail or those types of skills that kind of carry with you even no matter what industry you're in. It's something you do. So accuracy, those are the types of think of those are the transferable skills that you're going to have, and they often don't occur with people who are no, let me back up. Transferable skills are ones that you'll have in a lot of different jobs, but you may come with they'll come with you, right? They're a little bit different. So you need all three. Okay, so anybody heard of Bill Gates? I think you have. So I just want to talk a little bit about this. This is a quote. All right. My people have the confidence of their convictions and know their skills. All right. So again, being able to identify your skills is the foundation of a successful job search. So you need to be able to identify your skills. Now, don't limit yourself when you're looking at this. I know it's tempting when you do these job searches and you think about what you have to bear that, no, I didn't do that. I don't know about that. Don't limit yourself and don't get hung up on individual definitions. Include skills that are learning. Being able to learn and being able to synthesize and assimilate new information, that is a skill. A lot of people just think it's, well, just part of having a job or just part of being an adult. You'd be surprised. And so make sure you think of it this way. The other thing I want to mention is, can I prove the skill, or how do I document or demonstrate or showcase the skill? Think of it that way, because when you talk about your skills, I'll tell you, in interviews, you may get follow-up questions based on it, and you want to have the ability to showcase what you're talking about. So think of how you prove your skills as well. So easy way to do this is this. Take a piece of paper, take a pencil, um, write down employment related activities that you've had, right? Not just the things you did each and every single day, but all of the things you did over the span of your employment there, all the things that you had to do. Think about that. Um, think of those that you had to perform in that activity and list the skills involved to accomplish each task. I promise you that the tasks that you were doing required more than one skill. So let's go back to that welder. When you are interpreting weld symbols and blueprints, you really have to be able to do it with really good attention to detail, and you have to be able to do it distraction free. Because if you misinterpret or you miss something, you can end up ruining a project or ruining your portion of a project, which costs because the metal that you're using, it's expensive. And so reading blueprint symbols or reading blueprint and interpreting weld symbols, that is more than just knowing what they look like. There's more skills involved in that. Likewise for you, I promise there are more skills that you have. So the other thing you can do, and this is a neat little exercise, is talk to colleagues or former colleagues, people, your friends, and just sit down and ask, what are some skills you've seen in me? What are some talents and capabilities you've seen in me? And tell me about them or ask them what they've seen in you. I promise that external view of that is going to truly help you um, understand yourself better. Sometimes getting an external view of yourself really helps people understand their own skill sets and what their real strengths are. And so it can be a really refreshing and strong way to revitalize what you think your skills may be, because I bet once you have that conversation, you will find that there are even more skills that you have to bring to bear that you didn't even realize. Okay, so we're at a little bit of a checkpoint here. So 3 types of skills. All right, transferable, soft, and job specific, right? So those are your 3 types of skills. Understanding the importance of identifying your skills is huge, because as you understand the importance of those skills, you're able to showcase them, and then you're able to demonstrate them and prove it. And then knowing how to identify your skills. Hopefully we've talked a little bit about how to do that. I'll remind everybody in the room, it is not an easy thing to do, because you have to look inward, and you have to do things that you kind of took for granted before. You thought you were good at this, you were good at that, now you just showcase it. But a lot of the skills you were using in your work before, you probably underestimated. You probably just thought they were inherent. Don't do that. Give yourself credit for all of those types of skills that you have. So, Heather, how are we doing? This is a good time to stop and see if there's any comments or questions I can address. Anything in our chat room?
Yeah. There's one question that came in. It says, I need help with how to sell myself in the interviews.
Sure.
I've been told that they get intimidated because I have a lot of experience, more experience than they do.
Sure. So, I'm going to just share with you. So first off, interviews are probably one of the most anxiety-inducing parts of our lives. Whenever we have an interview, they're up there with dentist appointments and all kinds of ones up there. They're not. There's always going to be some anxiety, and that's very normal. So just recognize that when you go into an interview, having a little bit of nervousness or anxiety is natural and normal. That's not abnormal at all. The second part is, when you get into a job interview and people say, wow, we've got a lot more qualifications than we had before, or wow, you're even more qualified than I am, or those types of things. Remember that you want to talk about the skills you have that relate directly to the company's needs for that position and the core competencies of that job, and bring them back to how you can address those with your skill sets. So whenever you see a job advertisement or job posting, study that job posting, study that job advertisement, because it's going to share with you what the company needs and why they need it. That's what you want to do. So you don't have to, in an interview, try to talk about the 500 different skills you have. You won't have enough time to do that in an interview. But you do absolutely want to focus in on the skills you have that link up to the job descriptions, core competencies, and what the company is needing. You want to make sure that the answers you give in an interview are always calibrated to the company's needs and that job posting, because bring them back to how you link up with one of those. If it's 5 things that they're looking for, if it's 6 things, if it's 11 things, whatever it is that they're doing, make sure you have the skills that link up to that, and make sure that you have an example or a way to showcase or prove you've got those skills that link up to what that core competencies are asking of you. So that's the best way to address that issue. I will also share, if there are issues where people are being impacted by, age differences or age disparities there, highly recommend our job search after 50 creative job search, because that's going to address a lot of those very specific kinds of things that you might be encountering on that score. So definitely keep an eye out and register for that creative job search. What else?
And then there's a question on, we just touch on more tips on getting to the interview stage?
Sure. So, and this will be addressed in a little bit of a in our resumes, because resumes are, and job applications, which are often derived from your resume, are essentially the selling document of your skills to get an interview. Nobody is going to hire off of a piece of paper. They're always going to want to interview you. So think of your resume as that. So what I will always say is, look at what you're applying for and make sure you alter each resume to address the core competencies and needs of the organization that you're applying at, so that it links up with that. There are a couple of strategies, and we can kind of talk about this as we get a little closer to the end, to make sure that your resume is calibrated as best you can. I'm sure if you've worked with CareerForce before, you've heard of ATS, applicant tracking systems. For those of you applying at larger organizations or sometimes even medium organizations, medium size, they're all kind of using some type of applicant tracking system that will winnow down the number of resumes that they have to review to a more manageable number. Applicant tracking systems have no powers of discernment and cannot view the application materials with any sense of judgment. All they can do is match, and how much of it is a match. So you always have to be aware of applicant tracking systems and how they work. And Heather, maybe in the chat at a moment, you can maybe put the CareerForce URL for applicant tracking systems that are in there to give our registrants today some tips on that, because those are becoming more and more popular as a way to kind of create a list of semifinalists or finalists for job interviews and then getting to that. So making sure that your resume, cover letter, application materials are calibrated so that they both can navigate the shoals of the applicant tracking systems that you may be encountering, and also making sure that a human reader is, after they get to a human reader, will be interested enough in your application materials to say, I need to talk to this person. So just a couple of bits and pieces to think about on getting from the applicant stage to the interview stage. I will tell you the resume writing workshops that we do for Creative Job Search will go into much more detail on that score, and it's a really good one to interview with, because I would say a lot of the questions I do receive have to do with how do I get from that stage into the interview? Because that's oftentimes the biggest gap there.
Yes,
Anything
lots of
else?
questions about resumes coming in. So I will actually put a link to sign up for some of our resume workshops and to sign up for a one-on-one appointment
Yep,
with your local CareerForce location. And then I'll put the link there for the applicant tracking system as well. We'll try to answer some of your questions about resumes. It may come in the follow-up email tomorrow, but I'll try to get to those, and I'll make sure to put some resources in the chat.
great, great. Thank you, Heather. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about showcasing your skills. And when I talk about showcasing your skills, I mean things like resumes, I mean things like portfolios, depending on what profession you're in, and the difference between, and making sure that you can, again, like I talked about, prove you've got the skills, not just say you have the skills, but being able to demonstrate and showcase them. So applications. Now, it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Have all of your information ready before you start. The dates, typically month and year of when you started and when you ended your jobs. Applicant tracking systems, just so you know, are typically calibrated to scan for dates. So they look for that. So jobs, applications that don't have dates sometimes won't make it through that. Your address, you don't have to put your physical home address where you live, but your city and state is important. A phone number that will get to you, and making sure, and I just want to say this, I know you know better, but I'm going to say it. Make sure your voicemail on your phone is activated. You may not be able to get to the phone every time somebody calls. You might be making supper, or you might be washing the dog, or you might be at the dentist or something, so you can't necessarily answer the phone when they call. But if they can't leave a message, my goodness, they might just go to the next person, and they may not even stop to say hi. So make sure your voicemail is activated and it's a work appropriate message. So again, gotta say it, but I know you know it, but I got to say it. And then anything else that is germane to the application. Be positive and honest. I'm going to say this: positivity attracts, negativity distracts. All right, I want to say that again: positivity attracts, negativity distracts. So applications, that when you're doing them, Put your best foot forward, put yourself in the limelight, make yourself the most positive person. You've all been at a party or a picnic or whatever where you see that person across the room and they're smiling and they're laughing and they're shaking hands. And no matter how rough of a day somebody's having, they can't help but be pulled in to that person's orbit and want to talk to them and get to know them. Be that person. You want that person because, again, positivity that is something that's one of those skills that it's a transferable skill that you want to showcase. All of us have off days, but that positivity is so important because that's what you want in if you're hiring for a team, you want that positivity and you want to be able to showcase that. And then honesty. Do not fabricate or exaggerate experience or skills. Here's why. You may be interviewing and they may have your application materials and they may pull that out and say, hey, just FYI, I saw this on your application or I saw this on your resume. Tell me more about it. What did you do? And they may ask even more detailed questions. If you are not being forthcoming, oh, you're going to age 6 months in about 2 minutes if that happens. And so please be candid and honest on those applications. Now, screening out applicants. Now, we just talked about applicant tracking softwares. That's what I mean. Making sure that you're using the keywords and phrases that are in the job description in your application materials. And we'll talk a little more about that near the end, but that is what an applicant tracking software is doing. Those systems, again, they don't offer you any powers of discernment or any judgment. They're not a person. But they can compare and contrast, and they can match things up. The way they do that is they look at keywords and phrases in that, and you want to make sure you can import those keywords and phrases in the job posting into your application materials as best you can, such that they match as much as you can, because that's that applicant tracking system at work. Use the space wisely. I'm going to be very honest with you. As people look through applications, whether they're resumes and cover letters, whether they're online applications that you have to step through because that's what that company uses, you want to make sure that you can sell your skills in a concise, punchy way. The reason why is because if you belabor the point or if you go on into detail that's excruciating, they're going to start skimming. You don't want your readers to start skimming your stuff. You want them to be held just enraptured by your application materials. You want them spellbound, and that's what you want with your application materials. So use your space wisely. No one is going to ding you because you were too concise and to the point. That's not going to happen. And then again, should go without saying, follow the directions to the letter. A lot of places will look at your capability of following those directions as a testimony about your attention to detail. So make sure you're following the directions, complete all the requirements, and be neat and tidy. Make sure that you're using the punctuation right. Make sure that your capitalization is on point. Make sure that all of your language about yourself is in the same tense. All of that, make sure that that's all tightened up. It really does matter when someone is looking through an application, and it just pulls them out of it when they see spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, those types of things. It's very jarring. So make sure that you're thinking of the highest quality application that you can possibly submit. Okay, not going to give you too long to do this, but here's a little exercise. I want you to take a look at this, and I want you to count the number of F's as in foxtrot that are in this box in this proofreading exercise. I'm only going to give you about 5 seconds to look. So take a look. Okay. How many do you think? I'm just looking at our chat box now. Okay. All right. So, I want to just say there are 6 F's as in foxtrot in that. Some of you probably didn't see that, some of you did. The reason why is the conjunction of, you probably missed them. There are 3 of those. So that's where you're getting thrown a curveball. And so remember that you want to just really proofread thoroughly, because again, employers can look at those errors or typos as a lack of attention to detail, and you never want that. So you really want to look at the highest quality that you can put forward. I know this is a little tricky because um, it's bunched up, but that's how easy it is to make little mistakes that can add up against you. So remember how important it is to proofread and making sure that you are submitting something without errors, because that is critically important for you showcasing, again, those soft and transferable skills. Okay. Now, if there's one question I get pretty much on a daily basis, if not a weekly basis, it's how do I articulate in my resume leaving a job, especially if there's a gap. All right. So remember when I said positivity attracts, negativity distracts. Same thing in your application materials as in person. Same principle at work. So you want to make sure that you talk. So some of them are just unfortunate. A company, had to downsize. There was a reorganization. The company made a whole chunk of us redundant because of fiscal issues. That is voluntary. That's involuntary. Those are the ones that you just really don't have control over. You can't control whether your company is going to be conducting layoffs. That's not something you can control. And you just kind of have to talk about that. I want to really emphasize we don't want to say, well, I was fired or that type of thing, or I quit or something like that. So when you resign, it's a voluntary separation, but you want to avoid those. I usually like to say, make sure that you um, absorb the question, make sure you have a concise but accurate answer. When people leave employment, you would be surprised. A lot of the time, it's absenteeism, and oftentimes it's related to a dependent care or health-related issue. It's not because you just were lazy or because you didn't want to work anymore. There are very real reasons for that. So I want you to think about making sure that when you get asked these questions, or if you do get asked those questions, make sure that you're able to say something different for each. So if it's an instance where it was an involuntary separation, I usually like to say things like, "Well, the company, it was a great opportunity, but after some difficult quarters, it had to organize, and this position was considered redundant, unfortunately." Everyone's going to know what that meant. Okay, happened. If you left because it was something, again, it was your choice. You were separated, or your employment was terminated. Just say, it was a great opportunity. Because of personal issues that are hereby, have resolved themselves, we had to end that employment relationship. I usually like to use the words end that employment relationship rather than fired or quit, because that is a more concise but appropriate way to talk about the liquidation or termination of a position. Okay, I want to talk about portfolios for just a minute. So portfolios, when people think portfolios, a lot of times they think about people in creative industries, painters or photographers or those types of jobs. But it's not really quite accurate. Portfolios can touch almost everyone. They include your resume or resumes, depending on if you're in a career pivot or considering one, your cover letters, reference sheets. And I say reference sheets plural because different reference people may give testimony to different skill sets you have, especially again, if you're looking at a career pivot. Any letters of recommendation or letters of reference that you want to showcase? Work samples, this is where it's important, if you're in sales, if you are in advertising, marketing, a lot of times you'll want to have work samples along with creative professionals, and any copies of licensures or certifications that you have. Those can be safety certifications through OSHA, those could be a copy of passing your practical nursing NCLEX test. Any number of things can go into that. But that is what a work portfolio is. It's a one-stop shop for you to be able to muster any needed documentation for a job that you find attractive or that you want to have. Make sure that they are all consistent and they look professional. And so and make sure that they're all up to date. I want to really emphasize when it comes to your reference sheets, make sure that the people that are on those reference sheets are up to date, and make sure that they are able to give the kind of testimony you know. The reason why is because people leave jobs, people move jobs, people retire, and so the contact information that you may have for your reference sheets in particular may change. So make sure all of things are up to date as well, along with any licensures or certifications. If those certifications or licensures have an expiration date that's approaching and you need to update that, make sure you have the most up-to-date version of your license and certifications in there, because that can matter as to whether or not they can offer you a position. Now, I want to talk a little bit about branding. This is one of the things that I think many of the times when I do resume reviews, people miss. And what I talk about is we get sometimes so hung up on, let's say, matching the applicant tracking software keywords or making sure that each one is tailored to the different job, that they forget that the brand identity that you're putting forward needs to be consistent. And they need to look not just appealing and attractive to the reader, but they need to look as seamless as you can make it. So I'm going to just show you something here. So this is an example of a resume for John Smith. John Smith doesn't exist, but you can see that this is just kind of a professional summary of this person's abilities, his skills, and his educational attainment, right? So that's one version. That's a resume. Now I want you to see. Oh, no, too far. Show you now. That is the cover letter. Now you can take a look at that cover letter, and you'll notice it's a very concise cover letter, 3 paragraphs. Says it's an enclosure. Sincerely, that's great. But I want to show you the difference here. If we think about branding critically and think about consistency critically, let me show you. Do you see the difference in quality and the difference in impact? I promise you a prospective reader of these materials will immediately look at that cover letter and that resume in a different light than the first one. Just because of just bringing along the header, bringing along that middle bar with the contact information, and bringing about the same kind of font and style totally changes the entire look, the entire layout of this. And I promise you, it will also alter the way it will be digested. I'm going to go back because I want to show you the difference. This is before. Nothing wrong with that cover letter. It's a perfectly valid cover letter. But look at the quality difference. There's really no comparison when you see that branding. That's what you want to think about, is making sure all of your materials are same font, style, laid out the same way. Very critical. Okay. Again, everyone, thank you. We've got a bit of time for questions. Heather, what have our participants been saying?
Yeah, we have quite a few questions.
Great.
I'll start with ones that are more about skills, and then there
Sure.
are quite a few about some resume and things like that. So, the first one is, how much should you focus on each type of skill, soft, transferable, and job skills?
So we calibrate. I'm assuming they're thinking about resumes and materials. We always calibrate what we're saying with the competencies of the job. So hard skills are those non-negotiables, right? So you want to absolutely make sure you address all the hard skills, right? Those job-specific skills, like again, I'll go back to the welder example. If the job says proficient in blueprint reading and symbol interpretation, you have to make sure that that's spelled out. You have to use the space you have to spell that out because that's a non-negotiable. And any other ones that are non-negotiables, you've got to take the time to spell those out. Then with the remaining space you have, whether it's a resume or it's an online application, if it has a word count limit, you may have seen those, they'll have word count limits sometimes on online applications, then you can fold in softer skills and transferable skills. So if you think of a hierarchy, we must always meet those core competencies of any job. Absolutely have to. Even if your soft skills are excellent, those core competencies have to be addressed. Then we can talk about transferable skills and soft skills. Those are the ones. So if you have to use your space wisely, that's how I would approach it.
Great. And this kind of falls along a little bit. Do you suggest using the same wording as the job description to highlight your skills, I'm assuming on your resume?
Absolutely, I would do that, and because first and foremost, when you apply at a job, the companies aren't going to tell you whether or not they're using an ATS, an applicant tracking system. They're not going to reveal that to you. So you almost have to think of it that they could be, and remember, those systems have no powers of discernment. They just have to go for it. They just match, 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 match. So think of it from that perspective, is matching with against the job description and what it's asking for in your materials, because that's the first eyes on your application materials will be that ATS. So you want to make sure that you are mirroring the language, because that's how the applicant tracking system is going to use to review it, if that makes sense.
Yes. Lots of questions about the applicant tracking.
Yes, yes, yes. You can.
It
Yeah,
did.
we've got a little bit of time for that. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, I did put another link to the website just with some information on there,
Great.
but we've got lots of questions about the formatting. Does the formatting, the font, any of that, does that matter when a company is using that applicant tracking software?
So usually what I'll say is, at least I don't want to say in the olden days of applicant tracking softwares, but typically I say for fonts, Times New Roman or Calibri are your best bets. Because both applicant tracking softwares and sometimes softwares for people who have disabilities can read that font easier. And so I usually recommend either of those two fonts for your materials as kind of industry standard types of for stylistic purposes.
Perfect. And then I know we went through a couple exercises to be able to identify our skills, but do you have any other resources on skills that they may not be able to recognize, and then ranking the skills by strength?
Yes, actually, you know what, Heather, I hate to drag you back to the CareerForce website, but we have that interest profiler that you can use at careerforcemn.com. Heather will put the direct URL. One of the great things about that is it takes a little bit of time, about 20 minutes, 40 minutes, depending on how fast you go. But it can give you a much better view of your holistic capabilities and skill sets that you have. So take some time with that. Don't rush through it. If you can spare the time, do that, because that interest profiler is a really cool tool to help you get your hands around the breadth of the skills you actually have. And I promise you, again, you've got more skills than you're giving yourself credit for.
Absolutely. And then I am going to put that in the chat right now for everybody. So that is in there. And I'll also include it in the follow-up email with the recording of today's workshop. Um, and next question. I have problems with interviews via Zoom or web type interviews, but
Sure.
rock in person. Where can I read the room? Any pointers for those situations?
Yes, actually, we have our creative job search that deals with interviews, talk specifically about virtual interviews, and virtual interviews are becoming much, much, much more common. For a whole host of reasons, they're becoming much more common. Part of relieving the anxiety is first off, testing all of your equipment, your internet, your headset, your screens, all of them beforehand, using the platform that is going to be used for your interview. Right now, you're using WebEx. But when Heather and I, if I call Heather, we're using Microsoft Teams. And other companies will use, when I was in higher education, we use Zoom exclusively. And so it was all over the place. And so there are different platforms for video conferencing and virtual interviews. So making sure you're familiar with the platform that's going to be used. Second, making sure that your space is appropriate and free of distractions, not just audio distractions for you, like the cat trying to jump into your lap, not just that, but look at it from the perspective of somebody who's looking at you. So making sure that it looks like a professional venue. You know, we communicate meaning not just with our words, but in how we hold our bodies and the way that we present visually. So making sure that you have that space set up will make you feel more confident that you're going in there as well. And one thing I like to do is take a friend, somebody you know, somebody that you can trust, and practice an interview using that platform as if you were doing that. And with that platform, you can get that kind of flavor of what it's going to be like, you know, if you're being interviewed on Zoom versus WebEx versus Teams. So those are some things. Lastly, in the email you'll get from Heather, you'll see your list of local career forces. Reach out to your local career force and make appointments for mock interviews and ask if you can do the mock interview over Microsoft Teams or something like that, where we can mimic that interview as well with you so you can feel more prepared. That's one of the services we offer, and for sure take advantage of that.
Great, thank you. There's a couple questions that just came in about all of the links that I've been sending. I know a lot have been sent in the chat. I will make sure to include
Yep.
all of the links that I sent in the chat with that
Yeah.
follow-up email tomorrow. So you will have all of this and the recording of today's workshop tomorrow by the end of the day. There was one question that just came in that I thought was good. What would you say is the difference between strengths versus skills?
So, so skills are things that you can demonstrate or showcase concisely and substantively. Okay. So I might say one of my strengths is writing. Like I'm a good writer. Okay. But it would take me quite a bit more time to demonstrate that than if I said I am somebody who is uh, really good about case management, for instance. Like if I said that that was one of my skills. So a strength is something that undergirds the skills you have, if that makes sense. The strength is what kind of buttresses the skills that you're showing. So because it's the skills that the employer really wants to know, and you wouldn't have those skills if they weren't strong points for you.
Perfect. Let's see. How do you identify the keywords in the job description?
So look for action verbs first and foremost. When you look at a job description, look at the action verbs that are listed. Sometimes they'll be really easy and they'll just create a bulleted list of 8 things. These are the core competencies. These are the things you do. Others, it might be a little more vague. But when you look at a job description, first off, look at action verbs and underline those. Those are going to be, that's the employer's way of showcasing these are the things that we are looking for in the successful candidate, you know, as soon as possible. You know, that's so look at the action verbs and see what those are, and that will give you a clue as to what kind of skills align with those action verbs, because that's going to be a pretty much a one-to-one comparison that they're going to use.
Perfect. How do you word reason for leaving when you got fired if the former employer will not give you a good reference? Unemployment officially says no employee misconduct.
Okay, so first and foremost, we never put references down who are people that we will. No. Our references are always people who will give prospective employers testimony about our capabilities as a worker in the best light possible. Okay. So I would really recommend you not put down anyone who isn't going to do that as a reference. Usually, I like to say if you were separated for cause or if you were let go in that way, I usually say it was a decision to end the employment relationship, and then button that up. That's all you need to say, and then when you are asked to furnish references, you make sure you're furnishing references for people who will give the testimony that you are the person that that company or organization is looking for.
Perfect. Yeah, there's a couple questions on here about this, a similar topic. If there
Mhm.
was, maybe some, just leaving or having to leave because it
Yep.
wasn't a good
Yep.
situation, but still feeling the need to protect, their
Mhm.
old employer.
Yep.
So just making sure that not
Yep.
going into that detail.
Yep. And
Um,
that is, and that happens every day in America. I just want to let everybody know that is not a character flaw on your part or, ineptitude or anything like that. That is sometimes just a bad fit, and that fit needed to be resolved by ending that employment relationship. And that again, that happens every single day in America. So please don't put that yoke of burden on you solely.
And one more along the same kind of lines. What do you do when you've had a few years of four jobs that the companies have either shut down or downsized?
So you've sort of been you broke a mirror, 7 years of bad luck, kind of just you've just been unfortunately made redundant. You know that that happens. I will tell you, in a lot, there are some sectors of our economy where that is actually not that abnormal. Just so you know, that actually can happen quite a few places. It's particularly if you work in manufacturing or anywhere like in Minnesota, especially that has seasonal employment, and conditions can change, and you were working all the way until November, and then you got laid off, and then that company got bought out. Those that can happen. I think you just make sure that it's addressed in your cover letter, and you talk about a wealth of experience. If that comes in the interview, then you just straight up say, I've been very lucky to have some really great jobs. It's been unfortunate that these companies just were needing to conduct layoffs, and I was one of those unlucky individuals. That's all it is. It's just it's not you. It's not a character flaw, right? You just address it, and anybody interviewing you who sees those types of things is going to know that that happens because it happens to companies all over. So it's not individualized and it's nothing personal.
Perfect. I know we still have a couple questions. They're probably a
Yeah,
little bit more in depth.
sure.
So I will definitely send, I know lots of questions about resumes, cover letters, interviews. I'm
Yeah,
going to send all of the links. We have workshops that cover all of those. So I'll make sure to include that tomorrow. And then if there's any specific questions too that we missed between me and Jason, we'll make sure to
yeah.
get those answered and send that in the follow-up as well tomorrow.
Yes, yes. Thank you guys for being here today. Really appreciate it. Enjoy this cool November day and stay warm, and we will be in touch. Take care, everybody.
Great. Thank you.